everybody. On behalf of Zuban Publishers and the Ashoka Center for Translation, I'm delighted to welcome you to this evening to the launch of Sabah's translation, Sabah Bashir's translation of the stories of Razia Sajjad Zahir. And as you can see, we have a wonderful panel to speak to you about the book. So I am not going to take any more of your time except to say this book is the 6th in a series that we are doing with the Ashoka Center for Translation. The first of the series was 6 books translated from different languages, and now the next installment of the series will go on with another 6, which will most likely be, most of them are nonfiction and autobiographical, mostly translated from different languages across India. So in the next year and a half, you will see more of these books. And we are delighted to be able to do them because the collaboration with Ashoka makes it possible for us to reach much wider with these books. And then it's not only a collaboration with Ashoka, but the thing is that it allows us to give the kind of value that we very much want to give, but we are often hampered from giving to translators who make different kinds of literatures come alive from their original languages, translated into other languages. And we are very grateful to all the translators for doing that. I'm going to hand over to Harris, who is going to moderate this session for us. I am not introducing the speakers. They will each introduce themselves. But Harris, as many of you know, is a teacher, a professor of literature at Delhi University. He's also a translator, and he has...
Karbala recently.
Sorry, oh, no, I thought I said the wrong thing in Delhi University, and you were, no.
No,
Yeah. And he has translated many things, and I hope that we will also work together in the future on a translation project, which will be revealed by and by. So thank you, all of you, for being here, and Harris, over to you. Oh, yes, and please unwrap the book so that there's a photo op, and you can all hold them up, and we'll take a photo for Instagram. And
yeah, we have to stand. Hello. I hope I'm audible. Yeah, great. Thank you so much, Urvashi, for the kind introduction. And I'm really looking forward to working with Zuban. Anyway, let me start by asking everyone to introduce themselves. We decided that we'll keep it very informal. So maybe we can begin by Sabah. Would you like to introduce? Sabah kuch to kaho. That is, यहाँ कफा सुदास नहीं है, लेकिन सबा जरूर कुछ कहेंगी.
Thank you, Harris. Yes, we are starting on an extremely informal note. I'm Sabah, the translator for this collection that we hear today. And I have done some translations earlier, and I teach at the Department of English, Jamia Millia Islamia.
I'm Shohini Ghosh. And I teach at the Mass Communication Research Center in Jamia Millia Islamia. And Sabah is my colleague in Jamia, and I have followed her work very closely. And I have a particular interest today because for 3 years I was the director of the Jamia archives. And at that time, we were able to acquire, with the help of Seema Bakar, who's here. Seema, you can raise your hand and just... she is the daughter of Najma Zahir, and she helped us get the private collection, private papers of Sajjad Zahir and Razia Sajjad Zahir for physical preservation. And therefore, I have a great deal of interest, but I have to admit this, that when I was actually, getting the papers, I was more interested in the Sajjad Zahir collection. after reading this book, I have a huge interest in Razia Sajjad Zahir, and I think I've tilted a little bit on one side, and that is a big success of this book, I think.
Shoni will again ask some more question to you regarding that
Sure,
archive.
sure.
It's a very important archive. Let us go to Sumaira. And Sumaira, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Sumaira. I recently received my PhD from the Institute of Islamic Studies at McGill University. I work with mostly Persian and Urdu trans-regional periodicals with Ottoman Turkish and modern Turkish to a limited extent. So I'm an intellectual historian who has always been very, very interested in, obviously, literary history. So when I was sent this book, I was told that this is, among the first the first translation of Razia Sajjad Zahir's works. And as someone who has enjoyed reading progressive writers, who enjoys reading Urdu fiction produced by women, especially A.R. Khatun, so I was very, very excited to see all these names mentioned in the introduction and then to be led into Razia Sajjad Zahir's Minds and Literary Oeuvre.
Yeah. So thank you, everyone. And before we start, I think the audience also deserve a round of applause. And let me just thank you for coming with, obviously this is not the final conclusion, but I thought I would just start with a couplet. Shukriya tere aane se raunak to badhi, warna ye mehfil jazbaat adhuri rehti. So thank you so much for coming. With this, let us start with our own friend Sabah. Sabah, the very first question to you, again, maybe you can introduce Razia Sajjad Zahir a bit, and then why Razia Sajjad Zahir? Among so many, you have mentioned, in a brilliant introduction, you mentioned A.R. Khatun, you mentioned so many other, 20th century. Why Razia Sajjad Zahir?
Thank you, Haris. Actually, the idea of translation started when I got a call from Professor Rita Kothari, and she talked about Women Translating Women project. So this is a project which is under the aegis of Ashoka Center for Translation. And she called me and she asked me that we have this project where 12 women translators are translating 12 different authors from different languages. And she asked me if I had some woman author from Urdu in mind. And to be very honest, very instinctively, my name came for Razia Sajjad Zahir. And then she said, okay, you think about it, write a proposal and send it to me. And later on, it was then when I started thinking, why did this particular name came first to me? And I realized when I was doing my PhD, which was about nearly 20 years back, I had started reading Sajjad Zahir's Roshnai, which was translated as The Light. It's a fascinating book. And while I read about Sajjad Zahir, his life, what he did, what he wrote, how he wrote, at the back of my mind, I was always wondering about his wife and daughters. Maybe, again, I don't know if it's a right thing to do or not. Maybe I was personalizing it. I was doing my PhD, and I usually say I started my PhD when my daughter was 3 and my father-in-law 73. So I was really going through a lot of hard work in the sense, in between your studies and then you're running a house. And every time and throughout the time I was reading Roshnai, it kept on hitting me. There is a wife who is taking care of, and I started reading about Razia Sajjad Zahir. There she was a woman who was teaching in a college. She was bringing up the girls on her own. She had literary activities. She was writing, she was translating, she was doing theater. So how was she actually managing? And when I started to look for the translations, and I think there are only one, which is an anthology, which I think Urvashi only had brought out. Yeah. So then it really hit me that there is someone with this huge body of work, magnificent body of work, and somehow we tend to overshadow, and again, in no way undermining the work of Sajjad Zahir, which was absolutely fantastic. But somehow in all of that, when we are perpetually talking about the Progressive Writers Association, we are talking about the authors, we tend to forget Razia Sajjad Zahir. So, it was accepted by, Professor Rita Kothari was most appreciative of it. I sent in the proposal, and that's how it started.
when you talk about progressive writer. So, specifically the question of gender. And, I am specifically talking about this idea because if you look at the early archives of progressive writers, whether it is the manifesto or the Premchand's address, such an important document, you find that, yes, they talk about gender, but not very directly. And then you have someone who is playing a very important role. So perhaps this question of gender and progressive, if you would like to, perhaps give us more, insight into it. Specifically, how would you place Razia vis-a-vis other progressive writers, especially women authors? Isma Chughtai is such a popular author. There is, Rashid Jahan. How would you perhaps locate Razia in that tradition of progressive writing within codes?
I always found Razia Sajjad Zahir to be more progressive, in the sense not only in terms of language, but also in terms of content. The themes, the real manifesto of the Progressive Writers Association talking about that common man, that individualism, that idea of the person next door, that shines in the stories of Razia Sajjad Zahir in a far different manner. And again, when we are talking about different authors, we never put, no, this one's better or that one. I really don't believe in doing that. Yeah. The thing is, every author, it's important in its own space. So for Razia Sajjad Zahir, what I really realized, that even for the short stories that you find in this book, they're not really short story per se, when we put it in that category. So many of these are sketches, जिसको हम उर्दू में खाके कहते हैं. And she's writing about her domestic help, she's writing about her neighbor, she's writing about the person who works for her or her postman. So, there is a kind of a vision, there is a perspective, her lens is different, which I find is more progressive in the terms of the content of progressive writing.
Yeah, maybe, Shohini, I'll come to you now. Taking cue from what Sabah has said, pertaining to the progressive lens, any specific story that you find is very important, and when we talk about progressive agenda as such?
I have a bit of a mixed feeling about the so-called progressivist agenda, because it kind of privileged a certain kind of realism. I'm equally interested in Miraji, equally. Yes. And in fact, one of the reasons why I think I'm very drawn to Razia Sajjad Zahir is because she privileges the idea of individual subjectivity and interiority. Yes. And as she is watching the others, because one of the things that we say is that the progressive writers were talking about other people. Indeed, they were. And so does Razia Sajjad Zahir, as Sabah pointed out. But at the same time, she is also observing her own encounter with the so-called other. And this I found to be the most powerful in this book. And that particularly comes out in Neech, or the low caste, when there is this Dalit woman who's very charismatic and striking, and she also has a pretty transgressive story. She has left her husband and has come to live with a high caste person who is, does a kind of a guard's job or something like that. But I mean, not very high in the hierarchy of professions, but she's marrying across, castes, and also living with somebody who's not her husband, and therefore, for both these twofold transgressions, the people around her talk about her and all that, and constantly malign her. And the female protagonist, who is narrating the story in first person, is completely, she is both fascinated by her, intrigued by her, also critical of her. How could she leave her husband? What kind of a woman leaves the husband? And then she says, look at her, she's running around, all the men are standing around watching her. She's so unself-conscious about it, but this is a bit shameless. And she said, but what is there to be shameful about? So she's constantly questioning herself. And then also when, and this of course is very interesting because historically, Marxists have not taken caste seriously. They have always looked at class as a problem. And there she says that, of course, I don't believe in caste, so I'm not going to, I've grown up hearing all these cliched ideas from my grandmother and people in the family about how low caste women behave and they go off with different men, etc. I'm not going to fall into this trap, but at one point when she's having this kind of a dilemma in her head, and she says, maybe this is how low caste people, and she's like, she chides herself, like, oh my God, but I don't believe in caste. How am I thinking like this? But the fact is that she is thinking about it. She is foregrounding it. So it's also about the middle class educated mind struggling to be on the path they are advocating for all other women. And this kind of self-reflexivity and introspection I find deeply engaging.
So if I may come back to Sabaa, you know, something what Sioni has pointed out, it's very important. And you mentioned the idea of Khaka itself, the sketches. So do you think that there was Khaka of the author itself when you look at the stories as such? Is it somewhat, you know, semi-autobiographical, we know, but then the idea of not choosing fiction, non-fiction, but fiction to, you know, perhaps present this Khaka of self?
Absolutely. In fact, a few of them where she's even talking about her daughter, and then if you realize कि वो वही नाम भी इस्तेमाल कर रही हैं. For example, in Sutun में, where she's talking about her domestic help, and even Yes Sir, the pillar. Even in Yes Sir, where she's talking about a postman, and even in Urdu, the title of the short story is Yes Sir. And she's a little perturbed because ये postman आ रहा है और ये अंग्रेजी में बात कर रहा है और इनको sir कह के address कर रहा है. But even there, I mean, apart from the fact that it's in first person, she's a lecturer who goes to college, who comes back, and there are references of her personal life very apparently. So one realizes, apart from the fact that most of the things are semi-autobiographical, some are completely out of slices from her own life.
Important, because when we talk about this whole idea of individualism, and moreover progressives, as we know, as the general idea goes, that they focus more on political. But there is also an individual, and with that I will perhaps like Sumaira to intervene. This whole idea of individualism that you talk about, which was becoming part, the expression of self by women, specifically women authors from early 20th century or maybe late 19th century.
Yeah.
How would you perhaps think about the role of print culture, specifically when you look at this expression of self? How the self was performed, specifically when you look at Urdu writing or Urdu women's writing as such?
Yeah, sure. No, thank you for the question. पहली बार तो ये हुआ कि the novels that I was reading, ठीक है, आप अखलाकी novel की बात कर रहे हैं, आप कह रहे हैं reformist novel होना चाहिए. But there the idea was this domestic woman who is reformed in a very particular Victorian sense. And by 1920s, especially with periodicals, the kind of experimentations that were being made were looking at the feeling subject of a woman, the desiring subject. तो अगर मैं मिसाल के तौर पर बताऊं, सज्जाद हैदर यल्दरम, who happens to be the father of Qurratul Ain Haider, the first Urdu short story is produced by this man, and it's a translation from Ottoman Turkish into Urdu of a kind that it doesn't even become part of Turkish literary canon. So he's also translating pulp fiction as Aseb-i-Ulfat, which is Buhran Gecesi in Turkish. All of it coming down to the psychological collapse of a woman jaded in love. And here with Urdu periodicals, the one specifically I speak of would be Marif. Zyada din chal nahi pata hai, 1898 to 1901. But the short stories here, from being translated from Turkish into Urdu, are the ones where you can unsettle all ideas of ideal womanhood. Where you can say, ठीक है, ख़वातीन को किस तरह सोचना चाहिए, इश्क करना चाहिए तो किस तरह करना चाहिए, किस्सा दास्तान वाला इश्क नहीं चाहिए, but we still want to be desiring subjects without either being infantilized or without being put into certain Persianate frameworks. I think Razia Sajjad Zahir must have also read Yildirim. So we had this idea that you can experiment. Either you take the Marxist framework and you become Taraqi Pasand, Adeeb hai hum, or you say, no, but the Turks are doing it and we really like them. So this is how you also expand the domain of experimentations.
With that also, this whole idea of women as the subject of reform, which was already there in 19th century and early 20th century.
Yeah.
And Yildirim was also part of the modernists, because when you talk about women reform, perhaps we can talk about two camps. One is the religious group, represented by Deoband, and another is the modernist, which is Aligarh school. So perhaps here, when you look at these kind of dilemma, that women had, whether to choose with this idea or with this, but ultimately the subject of reform is women. Exactly. So perhaps the focus on domestic, specifically in some of the authors that you have read, apart from Razia Sajjad Zahir, you mentioned A.R. Khatun. Perhaps A.R. Khatun, let me introduce A.R. Khatun. She is considered to be the very first woman to have a collection of short story. I think it was published in 1920 something, not very sure about it. Gulistan-e-Khatun is the title. So perhaps this whole idea of women as subject of reform, and perhaps the focus on domestic sphere as such, maybe if you can tell us about that.
For sure. No, to think of कि अगर हम इनकलाब की बात कर रहे हैं तो ज़रूरी नहीं कि वो नारे लगाकर सड़क पर ही आएगा. So in periodical culture especially, because our fiction is being serialized first, so that readers can also respond about what they like, what they enjoy, and what they don't like. And a lot of the questions coming in here is, why are you only discussing reform where we are becoming ideal wives to husbands? What about entertainment? What about if I want to divorce this man, how do I get meher? So periodicals are also spaces where you are discussing individual liberties and rights. All as Muslim women too, nobody is denying their religiosity, but also coming down to the point of entertainment. Well, if the Turkish women are perfectly fine with acknowledging their sexual desires, then why can't I do it too? And it's something that happens in the global Muslim public spheres across languages. So this is one thing I extremely enjoy with this kind of fiction, that it speaks right through our neighbors. So even in Persian, with fiction being produced in Qajar, Iran, there too it's being discussed that why is it that we must only be talking about, say, the constitutional revolution, only in very specific political frameworks. So that way, this domesticity is not just about घोरे बायरे, ठीक है, cultural setup घर में आएगा, मैं साड़ी इस तरह पहनूंगी क्योंकि अंग्रेज़ का तशद्दुद तो मेरे मियाँ पर हो रहा है. Not that, but also I wanted entertainment too. I am also a reading subject. So to say, don't just give me textbooks. And that's what we really, really enjoy with even fiction produced by Razia Sajjad Zahir. Like, it's not to say there's going to be sycophancy for my great husband who's now in prison. Or there's going to be, look how much my family has sacrificed because of their political ideals. It's so self-reflexive to say, well, maybe I'm casteist too, lekin caste to hota hi nahi kuch. Or to say, maybe I'm getting offended by this English-speaking postman, ye yes sir kaise bula raha hai, lekin aakhir mein, no spoilers, but this yes sir will also make sure her money reaches her on time. So these kind of stories also charm you in a way that we don't always have to be at the mantle disrupting societal norms in only particular ways. This everyday self-reflexivity is very important.
Yes, Sumaira. In fact, this whole idea of Ishq and Inqilab going together is something which is very interesting. And with Razia, I think this idea of Inqilab and Ishq becomes a part of domestic sphere. This is something which I find in most, it's a kind of connecting thread that you find in various stories which Sabah has translated. Now with that, Shuni, since you have already introduced the archives, I'm very much interested, and I'm very sure some of our friends who are sitting there, they might also be interested in the archive. So maybe you can just tell about how did you perhaps think about collecting and the necessity and importance of archive. Your emphasis was on Sajjad Zahir, but then ultimately we have Razia Sajjad Zahir also as a very integral part. And here again, the Ishq and Inqilab, they are going together. And reminds me of Faiz Sahab, kuch ishq kiya, kuch kaam. So ये काम और इश्क कैसे हुआ साथ में, आर्काइव से सोच के आप थोड़ा सा हमें बताइए.
तो कभी-कभी वही होता है ना, नाना करते प्यार तुम्ही से कर बैठे. तो वो वाली बात हो गई, because I was actually quite reluctant to become the director of the archives, and because I had just come out of one directorship of the Mass Communication Research Center. I was just looking forward to, teaching and reading and doing my research, and then I didn't want to have this. And then I got into this in the archives, but I'm a little bit like, yes, sir, like you send me to a post office and I'll work hard there. So, so that's how and now I feel that it's one of the best things that happened to me, because I learned so much about archiving, I learned so much about Jamia. And there was also a selfish reason, because I have the, from 2009, I have the Sajjad Zahir chair in Jamia. So I felt that I wasn't doing enough for Sajjad Zahir. And therefore, when this opportunity happened, I thought it was really fortuitous and really good. And the Jamia archives, we call it the Premchand archives for short, and a lot of people think it's about Premchand. It is not. We have a room of Premchand and his contemporaries, but it is not just about Premchand. And here we have two sections in the archives. One is the history of Jamia, which is also very closely linked to the national movement, the struggle for independence, and the other is the literary part of the archives. So this actually came out of a long-standing relationship that I've had with the University of Texas, Austin, where I have very closely worked with the South Asia program. And one of my friends, who's now the director, would visit, and we are very good friends, and we would exchange all these. And he has written a very important book on Kurathil and Heather. But the thing is that I never wanted to become the director of the archives, but it was always my favorite place. So whenever Akbar came, we would first go to the archives and then come to the Mass Communication Center. So when they got and Seema has actually been the important part of it, that when she wanted, this entire private, papers to be digitized, she did that in collaboration with the University of Texas, Austin. And for all of you who are interested in Sajjad Zahir and Razia Sajjad Zahir, please visit the digital archives. And there's a lot that, you can have access to, a lot that is going to come, because it's still, the archive is still being built. It's in process. And it was actually Mary Radar, who is the librarian and the force behind the digital archives. She was a Fulbright scholar at the archives. And she then, I think, made this connection. Because actually what the Jamia Archives specializes in is physical preservation, which of course is incredibly challenging when you don't have enough money. We cannot emphasize for scholarship the importance of primary sources. The original manuscripts. So the original manuscripts and original papers, letters, diaries, everything that that person has actually produced is something to be preserved for serious scholarship. Okay. And there is a lot that you learn from that original manuscript that you cannot learn from, say, a digital representation. So in a way, the digital is a surrogate. It's not really, it cannot match the original. And then, so the manuscripts that we have is not just about the text, but it's also about, it's layered. It's also an object. So it tells you about the ink in the way it's written. It tells you about the paper. It often gives you an insight into the way the writer is thinking, whether they have annotated, whether they have crossed something out, they have made comments. So there's a lot. And of course, not to mention the fact that tomorrow you might have a set of scholars who will come with a completely different set of theoretical ideas about how to read this, read the work. So it's so much more than just the text that it contains. And therefore it is important. And therefore, it's different from a library. You cannot open it up to everybody unless you actually have a curated exhibition or something like that. So that's the role of the archives. And I hope that we can keep this collection, this absolutely wonderful, very, very copious collection, safely preserve it and make it accessible to scholars who are looking at primary sources. So basically, that's the attempt right now.
Yes, Shoni, it's a very important point that we think about archive, because as a teacher of literature, I also, often visit archive just to see the difference between manuscript and another. And, often it is surprising. It's an eye-opening. Those who are from literature, we have grown up, with this discussion, this very perfect definition of poetry. Poetry is overflow, or spontaneous overflow of emotion. You ask everyone, they'll tell this definition. Now, when you go and look at Wordsworth, you will see the manuscript is very different from what it is published. So it is not at all overflow. So often, these things are challenged, ideas are challenged when you look at marginal notes, when you look at the ink also, the way it is written. And now, why am I saying this? Because I'm again coming to you, Sabah, because in the introduction, it's a very impressive, and I would suggest who are planning to read, please start with the introduction, not with the story. Although the stories have their own charms, but the introduction is very, you have set the tone for this. And it seems that you have really worked hard with the archive. For example, you talk about Banne Mia's episode, you talk about how she talks about Nehru. So maybe you also talk about your tryst with the archive, the biographical, something which you have read. And perhaps, I don't know if you found something paratextual apart from the main text. Maybe you can also talk about that.
There isn't much which is there on Razia Sajjad Zahir in English. So which was a challenge for me, because then you have to perpetually go to her own writings to actually decipher what was what she was as a person. And in terms of, there are two kind of biographies written by her daughter, which are by her youngest daughter, Noor Zahir. One is Mere Hisse Ki Roshnai, and there's another one, Siyahi Ki Ek Boond. So I read those two as well, but largely the interpretation of Razia Sajjad Zahir as a person was through her own writings. That was actually my own attempt to do it. But this episode that you're talking about, I did read somewhere about she
Nehru
going
episode.
the Nehru
It's very
episode.
funny also, maybe, some of us would be interested.
So, I mean, maybe I can read out, that's there in the introduction.
That would be great, Sabha.
And although the introduction, I have translated it, but since I'll read it in Urdu only. And then the first paragraph is just as a gist. A 6-month pregnant Razia Sajjad Zahir meets the then Prime Minister of India, Jawaharlal Nehru. It is believed that this happened sometime in 1958, and this is the conversation that ensues. Nehru: किसने कहा था बनने को पाकिस्तान जाने को? रज़िया: कम्युनिस्ट पार्टी ने। पार्टी उन्हें भारतीय नागरिकता क्यों नहीं दिलवाती? रज़िया: देश में सरकार तो आपकी है। नेहरू: पार्टी तो सुना है उन्हें मेंबरशिप भी नहीं दे रही। रज़िया: अभी तो वो कहीं के नागरिक ही नहीं हैं, तो उन्हें मेंबर कैसे बनाया जाए? नेहरू: तो पार्टी क्यों नहीं कहती मुझसे, आए दिन भूपेश गुप्ता और हिरेन मुखर्जी पार्लियामेंट में टकराते रहते हैं, इतनी सी बात नहीं कह सकते? तुम्हें भेजा है, क्या अपनी मर्जी से गए थे बनने पाकिस्तान? रज़िया: पार्टी का कहने का तरीका दूसरा होगा। पंडित जी, आपके दरवाजे पे लाल झंडे वालों का जुलूस आएगा। नेहरू: तुम धमकी दे रही हो? रज़िया: नहीं, मैं किसी जुलूस को अपने प्रधानमंत्री के दरवाजे पर नहीं पहुंचने देना चाहती। नेहरू: वाह, धमकी भी और आश्वासन भी। रज़िया: मैं वापस नहीं आऊंगी पंडित जी, आपके दरवाजे पर भूख हड़ताल कर बैठूंगी। You know, so this is, in fact, I've started my introduction to the book with this. I just wanted to place Razia Sajjad Zahir as a person. So someone who could go and talk to the then Prime Minister in such a way, and he's also cracking a joke about it, कि तुम आश्वासन भी दे रही हो और धमकी भी दे रही हो. So it not only talks about the equation that they had, but it also talks about the times that was in those times, or about, and then you have a situation कि वो उनको नागरिकता नहीं मिल रही थी, and so there is a political stance over there, there is a social stance over there. You have a complete picture of what was happening in 1958 in the country, and of course the strong person that Razia Sajjad Zahir is.
Yes, Sabha. In fact, this is a very interesting example because it also somehow challenges this monolithic idea of partition. You know, we often talk about migration and partition. Ye to chale gaye, ye ruk gaye. You know, it was not as, there were so many other factors. I remember working with one of the archives, and I found out that there was a group of, there was a family from Dehradun. And in fact, in one of those testimony, they mentioned that they were somewhere else celebrating something, and partition happened. So from there, they took flight to Karachi. Now, this experience of partition is very much different from someone who is walking on foot. So when we talk about Manto, when we talk about other, there is a very specific idea of partition, migration, the idea of citizenship also. But then there is something else, okay? So this whole idea of partition, so maybe I will come back to this translation. And perhaps, Sumaira, would you like to talk about how, in what way she's trying to complicate the idea of partition as such? Specifically, there are two stories, and I'm specifically referring to Andhera, as well as the second is Salt. And Sabha, I would also like your response, and Shoni your, on the idea of partition, because she was writing, as you mentioned, that's a very important time that she's writing. So how, in what way she's responding to partition, and if there is a difference, how would you perhaps like to talk about that difference? Yes, Sumaira.
Yeah, sure, I can take it up. One being, again, this brilliant rereading of the partition beyond the normative idea कि एक तबका था जो चला गया और जो यहाँ रुक गए वो इस वजह से रुक गए क्योंकि एक तरह से उनकी सोच हिंदुस्तान के बारे में एक तर्ज की थी. But to say now we have more archival research, especially say Rotem Giva's new book, Delhi Reborn, just to give you say some one footnote here, to say that Evacuee Property Act was also really complicated, oftentimes also misused, that now that we have an exodus of people coming in who has to be resettled, the community here also has to be forced to leave. So there are cycles of violence, then force people to leave. It's a choice that some people make deliberately, some don't. गरम हवा की भी इसीलिए फिल्म की तनकीद की जाती है कि ऐसे तो आप फिर अपने मुल्क में एक ग्रोह का कहते रहेंगे, बताते ही रहिए कि आप देशभक्त हैं. Maybe then we will consider you to be part of this nation. And those kind of stories then are also reflected in much earlier writing with Razia Sajjad Zahir. Again, we are discussing this in the presence of Urvashi Butalia with your own gendered violence in the time of partition. There's also bureaucratic violence in the time of partition, and which makes this reality of ye chhod gaye to ab wahan ke ho gaye very, very complicated. And that's what we see with Razia Sajjad Zahir's stories too. If I may add to this question, I was also very curious about the choice of stories that are here. Some very self-reflective, some clearly speaking about politics of the time. Haris, I'm sure I've taken the question.
I'm sorry for stopping. I'll come back.
Yeah.
That's my question, and I'm going to ask that. So maybe you can just respond to partition now, specifically these two stories that are there.
Yeah, no, just with these two stories as well. Again, on one hand, there is a very clear questioning of, okay, how is it that one political event will now describe all ideologies of all people very clearly, and now you can divide them into two clear groups, which is not what happens in a devastating moment like this. इसे खच्चा कहेंगे उर्दू में कि हादसे की तरह है, लोगों को समझ नहीं आ रहा कि हो क्या रहा है. And also then her own response to it, then how is it that the anxiety that comes in with making non-normative choices. आप एक मुसलमान खातून हैं जो पाकिस्तान ठीक है अगर जा रही हैं तो सिर्फ इसलिए जा रही हैं कि वहाँ रिश्तेदार और दोस्त हैं. उनसे मिलने के बाद घर यहाँ हिंदुस्तान में है तो वापसी होगी. वापसी में आप ट्रेन में बैठी हैं और अपने आसपास आपको लोग नज़र आ रहे हैं और आप सोच रही हैं, डू दे रिकग्नाइज मी दैट आई एम मुस्लिम? Even if I'm not visibly Muslim or that I don't even believe in Islam, I'm not religiously Muslim, but my name still is Razia. So is it that, and she's constantly thinking that eventually is there going to be an attack? Should I not have worn what I'm wearing? Should I have hidden my name? अरे इसने खुदा हाफिज क्यों कह दिया? अब तो वो समझ जाएगा क्या है. Very reminiscent of certain Uber rides, even today. And eventually, the people whom she was fearing, I'm giving major spoilers, come to her and say, आपकी कहानियाँ हमने पढ़ी हैं, आपके अफसाने हमने पढ़े हैं, या आपको जानते हैं, आपके बारे में सुना है, और हम तो क्या कहें, हम तो चाहते हैं कि आप हमें और बताएं कि आप आगे क्या लिख रही हैं, क्या बात करना चाह रही हैं. एंड देन शी रियलाइजेस ये जो इतना इस तरह था, ये जो सोच रही थी कि बस अभी हमला हो जाएगा, और उर्दू सुन ली है उन्होंने, और अब तो पार्टीशन के बाद ऐसा है कि तकसीम के सारे बदले मुझसे ले लिए जाएंगे. ऐसा कुछ नहीं होता, बिल्कुल बरक्स. सो इवन दैट वेरी इंडिविजुअल एक्सपीरियंस ऑफ एंजाइटी दैट यू हैव बिकॉज यू थिंक द पॉलिटिकल मोमेंट हैज़ कलर्ड everyone's perception of you, where your primary identity is just there. Then she's not Marxwadi Razia, then it's not Comrade Razia, then it's just someone who sounds and looks Muslim Razia. And the anxiety that comes up, which is, I was very anxious reading it.
Yes, very anxiety-inducing.
Exactly, because you're also predicting sexual violence. कि इस तरह की कहानियों का अंजाम एक ही तरह होता है. Thankfully it wasn't, it was completely opposite. उनसे अरे ये भी तो यूनियन लीडर हैं जो आपसे मिलने आए हैं सरदार जी, अब बात तो कीजिए इनसे. And that's when there's relief that washes over you even as a reader. It's one of the best stories here because you're also predicting, क्योंकि आपको लग रहा है कि इस वक्त के हालात इस कहानी में भी नज़र आ रहे हैं. So we almost assume कि अच्छा अब तो हमें नज़र आ रहा है कि किस तरह की वारदात होने वाली है. But that doesn't happen.
Yeah, and Sumer, it's also very interesting the way she points out, no matter how you run away from your identity, but you can't. Ultimately, you are, okay, no matter you do whatever. So ultimately, partition violence was about identity, if you remember. I'm reminded of Manto's story, I mean, the way, the identity becomes a marker of everything. You're reduced to your nominal identity, religious identity, irrespective of the fact that you are not even a practicing Muslim.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that is something which is interesting. Yeah. But I was also thinking from another, perspective, because these are not the immediate response to partition.
Yeah.
The violence is there, but it is not described as such. So Sabah, maybe you can also talk about this absence of violence that we find, and somehow I think these stories are not about, perhaps they bury any notion of partition being just a moment, partition is something that is ongoing, partition as something which is process. So I have two specific questions. I mean, very quick question. One is, perhaps how do you perhaps think about this story, which is very different from, say Manto and other progressive writers, the way they have described partition? And the second is this whole idea of partition, which is not just a historical event.
Thank you. Again, continuing with the example that Sumaira was talking about, she's talking about the title story, Andhera. And just adding on to what she's saying, again, I think we're ending up giving up spoilers for this particular story. Her, and again, as what Shoini was also saying, it was very anxiety-inducing in the sense, and even when I was reading it in Urdu, I could feel that, it's the reader response thing, because I could also imagine it would end up in some kind of violence, because then she had a book. And when there were people from outside the train and they were looking at the book, and then her fear was, because actually they were trying to recognize her as the author, but her fear was, it's an Urdu book. Why am I carrying an Urdu book in the train? And now I would be attacked. So this fear which is there, however, as she's saying, that it ends beautifully and it ends in a positive note. All her partition stories, at least the ones that I have read, are extremely positive. Somehow they have that, and that's another reason why I fell in love with these stories, because they have this feel-good feeling, they have this idea of positivity, there's still hope. Although they are the partition stories, and not only this one, Andhera, that we're talking about, even Namak for that matter. If you will allow, Haris, I'll read just the opening
yes,
page.
I wanted to talk about Namak now, yeah.
So Namak is another short story. I'll just read just the opening page. Safiya was surprised to see the Sikh woman. How much she looked like her late mother. The same heavy body, the same tiny eyes that twinkled with goodness, love, and kindness. A bright, luminous face like an open book, and a white muslin dupatta, just like the one Amma wore to attend Majlis during the month of Muharram. When she noticed Safiya's gaze lingering on her, the woman asked the daughter-in-law of the house about her and was informed that she was a Muslim who was going to Lahore the next day to meet her brother, whom she hadn't seen in many years. At the mention of Lahore, the woman got up, came to Safiya, and started telling her what a lovely city Lahore was, how beautiful the people of Lahore were, fond of good food and fine clothes, of traveling. In short, a picture of happiness and good cheer. In the background, the kirtan continued, and she kept talking about Lahore. Safiya asked her, "Has it been a while since you came here?" "Yes, I came when Hindustan was partitioned. It has been a long time, but my homeland, my dear, is still Lahore." A few shining tears fell from her lashes onto her milky white dupatta, and then she continued the same story of her land, her Lahore. The kirtan finished at around 11 p.m. When she got up to leave with prasad in her hand and responded to Safiya's salam with her blessings, Safiya whispered, "Let me know if you want me to bring something from Lahore." The woman was leaning against the door. After some hesitation, she whispered, "If possible, get some Lahori salt." And the rest of the story is, how this woman who goes there, and she's going to Lahore after a long time, and she is struggling to bring some Lahori namak for this woman whom she doesn't know.
You're not supposed to. That's the
And you're not supposed to. The problem is you cannot cross the borders with Lahori namak. And her pious temperament, she doesn't want to smuggle it in. And someone says, "Kisko chupa lo," so she has a tokri of kinu in it. So she makes a little puriya, she puts it under, and then she doesn't want to do that. Ki nahi, kisi ne namak manga hai, to chupa ke to nahi leke jaungi. And I'll not give the rest of the spoilers. It's a beautiful short story about how she brings it She brings this namak for someone, because even after the partition, she's here in India, but she keeps on saying, Mera Watan to wahi hai. And again, about translation, that idea about Watan, that idea about nation, it was extremely difficult to translate also, because somehow I felt that, wo jo वतन की जो जितनी बार वो बात होती थी, it was, I don't know if I managed to do some justice to that translation, but it was very intense. And again, these stories are not over the top. These are stories about things that you and I would know, you and I would have heard on first-hand experiences, and how it is extremely emotional, and people, go through these things.
Now, Sabah, since you have already mentioned this process of translation, I am interested in knowing, and perhaps we are all interested in knowing your approach to translation, specifically since we have a lot of discussion on loan words. For example, you said Watan. Now, it's difficult to translate Watan. Now, with Brooker Prize winner, and Deepa has her own policies, and she talks about non-italics. Usually we are trained to do italics. Now you have this new discussion that all these words, loan words, should not be italicized. Now, when I look at you, in some places you have done that, in some you have not. So perhaps maybe now you can talk about your approach to translation, specifically these ideas. For example, I remember you use word Nemat Khana also somewhere, which is not italicized. Now, why Nemat Khana is not italicized, whereas...
See, I can talk more about the process of translation and about italicizing. Maybe I'll pass on the mic to the publishers over there. We did have a lot of to and fro discussions. But see, Watan to tabhi ho gaya tha. For this particular story, Namak Ki Pudiya was more of a challenge for me, because wo Namak Ki Pudiya, and again, as when we talk about translation, and on a personal level, when I translate, I always talk about that translation is not only about the transference of meaning from the source language to the target language. You have to retain the cultural nuances of the source language. Plus, when you read the story in the source language, there is a kind of a visual image that comes to your mind. For me, when I translate, as a personal check, is that image coming to me when I read the English? So that is a check that I do on myself, that idea about that visual image which comes to my mind. For Namak Ki Pudiya, because, it's not a pouch, it's not a packet, and every time you say that ki wo kagas mein rakh ke lapeta gaya aur rakha gaya, you can't do that every time in English. And there was no appropriate word for pudiya as such, and then here we are talking about a namak ki choti si pudiya ho rahi hai, which is trying to hide it in a basket of quinoa or whatever. But having said that, and since I have been translating different authors also, I've realized that with every author, there is one characteristic which stands out. For example, with Manto, when I was translating Manto, it was his idiomatic references. He used idiom, and in the next sentence, he made sure that he's giving some reference to that idiom in a different context. Or with Gulzar, it was his juxtaposed imagery and things, which you can't bring it in English. With Razia Sajjad Zahir, it was largely her use of the homonyms that we called, the same word in different meanings. For example, like I was giving you the example of this short story, Sutoon. Sutoon is a pillar, and she's talking about her domestic help, jo unki zindagi ke sutoon hai. So, and of course, he's a pillar of strength, very good. After one sentence, she talks about the parliament ke sutoon. So these are the columns of the parliament. So, and when you're doing it in English and you use a pillar and a column, how do you talk about that? The title of the story is Sutoon. So, in fact, there is a little paragraph in Urdu, which I'll read out, which is from another story, which is Wo Sholay, where she's describing a little girl, and a little girl who's very, she's the daughter of the domestic help. स्कूल नहीं जाती हैं, but बाकी बहुत दिलचस्प चीज़ें होती है. So, just 3 lines from here.
The flame in your book.
Yeah, flame. It's translated as flame, and Urdu title is वो शोले. कभी कभी मेरा दिल बहुत चाहता था कि मैं उस पर अपनी उर्दू की 5वीं किताब और अंग्रेज़ी की 4थी किताब का रूप जमाऊं. लेकिन तौबा कीजिए, जब वे टूटी हुई चूड़ियों को तपाकर बूंदे बनाती, झरबरी पर कांटों के बावजूद, और नीम पर गिलहरी की तरह चढ़ जाती, लकड़ियों का वह ढेर दिखाती जो उसने जंगल में जमा किया था, अपनी बकरियों को धोती, आम की गुठली से बनाए हुए पपीहे को बचाती. So now this is the use of the word papiha that he is using, which is made from a dried मैंगो सीड, कि वो आम की जब गुठली सूख जाती है और एक तरफ से कोना खुला होता है तो उसकी सीटी जो बचती है उसको पपीहा कहते हैं. एंड पपीहा इज ऑल्सो अ बर्ड. एंड इन द नेक्स्ट सेंटेंस which comes, और पपीहे को बजाती और पपीहे को बजाते हुए हाथ नचा नचा कर गाती, मेरा पपीहा बोले राम जी का तीतर बोले, कैसे बोले पटपी, और मेरी सारी लियाकत धरी की धरी रह जाती. So apart from that lingo, the dialects, and of course, I thought, I don't know, maybe because Razia Sajjad Zahir was a translator herself, she translated a lot of English into Urdu, German, which was already translated into English and then into Urdu. Maybe she was playing and she was thinking, hopefully that someday someone would translate her works. So this paragraph about, and there one finds it recurring in many of her stories. This is Sutun ka, ya papiha. So that was extremely, that was a challenge. I mean, I really had to.
And in fact, listening to this Urdu one, Yani, we all admit it was a challenge. Some of us are translators, we know, how much time you have to spend. I remember, spending 6 hours just to translate one paragraph once, because it was too complicated. You have to understand the language nuisance. It's not just the, that you know 2 languages and you can translate. Yeah.
It's just not that.
Yeah. Shoni, since we have already discussed Andhera, there is one very interesting story that you mentioned in the very beginning, Niche. I really wanted to talk about Niche as such, which you have translated as low caste. Perhaps, how does it unsettles our understanding of caste? Because when you talk about Urdu literature as such, Urdu short story, it is said that, there is this voice or, question of caste is somewhat missing. So perhaps from that perspective, how do you see this story or Razia's intervention on the discourse of caste as such?
Actually, that's the thing I began with, actually.
Yes, I know.
Yes,
So I wanted you to perhaps talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, I just said what I thought about it. I mean, the fact that, that the whole idea of being a vanguard to change, that, we are going to have this revolution and we are on the vanguard. And I like Razia Sajjad Zahir because she refuses that vanguardist position. She says that we have to change as much as they have to change. And that's why this, and also she brings in a little bit of humor in it also. So it's not didactic and polemic, but she's also saying that, here, I understand what my mother and grandmother were saying were casteist cliches, but good heavens, I have inherited some of that. And now I am falling prey to this, and what do I do with it? And I think that was what is interesting, because she refuses that vanguardist position. She says that we have to change as much as everybody else has to change. Or even her getting shocked that, oh my God, how can she say that her husband is dead when he's alive? And she asks Shamli, who is the charismatic protagonist of Niche or low caste, and she says, well, he's dead for me.
The very agency of Dalit character.
And there is so much that, she learns about even, about feminism in a way. She's like Shamli is a kind of a proto-feminist. And so she's constantly, allowing herself to learn, allowing herself to admit to, where she's, where her contradictions lie. And that is why I find this very powerful. And she does that for a variety of things, even about, women's sexual behavior. It's not just, Shamli's story is not just about caste. It's also about sexual transgressions and all that. So, but I thought that Sumaira did a very good job of talking about Andhera. I think the mistake that we have made as a panel is that we've given the end away, and that isn't a nice thing to do. But I will say this, that when I was reading it and I had the same kind of response, I was getting very, very anxious and therefore very keen to reach the end, even though I also knew that she's probably mistaken and this is just an anxiety. But I think the reason why I responded like that is also because today we also inhabit a world of fear. And therefore, it has a kind of very, I think that it's an extraordinary story because of the I haven't read a story in a long time that is able to convey the affective experience of fear in this visceral manner. And I think that that is what actually makes this story so powerful. So even though you know that the end may be quite all right, or the end may be brutal, it doesn't matter, because you're caught in this, you're immersed in this sensorium of fear. And I think that is what is very powerful about that story, which also makes it very contemporary. And this is one other thing I wanted to say, that at no point when I was reading these, afsanas or short stories, did I feel that, oh, I'm learning about another world and this happened in the past. I think there is a lot of contemporary resonance in all her stories, and perhaps because she spent a lot of time alone without her husband, because her husband was in jail, so she has to manage, as Sabah said right at the beginning, she's managing house, she's managing children, she's also writing, she's translating, she's teaching, she's doing a variety of things, and there's also a lovely description of her stirring the lunch pot while taking a puff of a cigarette and all that. So she's doing all this. And I think a lot of people who are single people or single parents it will resonate with them. So I also highly recommend this book, because it's not just about what happened in the past, it's also what is happening around us today. And the past becomes more present to us because of what we are surrounded by.
Yeah, the temporality part is important, but I was also quite happy to see the range of themes. So from our discussion, it might appear that she's just talking about fear, she's talking about, caste, but there is so much in the stories that, and Sabah, if I may, we are about to end. Just one thing, what was a criteria for the selection of the text? And perhaps just one last thing, which is your favorite story? I know as a translator, you don't have one, but again, I would, because
No,
I have one.
not as a
She will say, I love all my children equally.
Yes,
No,
yes.
no.
That's a very motherly advice, but no.
Not at all. Not as a translator, but in terms of content, my favorite is definitely Sutun. Sutun, it's just like, maybe I was identifying with it, and it's about how she was struggling with work and how she was managing everything. But about choice of short stories and things like that, sometimes I think most of us here are students of literature. कभी-कभी वो critics ज़्यादा ढूंढ लेते हैं. इतना, हाँ, I know. Because these were the stories which were nice. So I don't know, I did not give it so much of a thought about in terms of, these are soft stories that you and I can relate to them, even after being written 50, 70 years later. That's what I'm saying, I can still relate to most of these stories. So, as if, it's being talked about from the neighbor's house. So,
Yeah, Sabine, I must congratulate you. It represents Razia Sajjad Zahir as a writer. So that's what, the way you have selected, it might be voluntary. I don't know what, choices were there, but yet it expresses, gives this impression of her as a writer. Sumaira, yes. Sumaira, perhaps at the end, maybe, which is your favorite story and why? I mean, I know you have not translated, so it could not be a very motherly answer, but which is your favorite story and why?
I feel maybe I'll reserve my answer because I end up giving too many spoilers.
But just one story, that's the name.
If you give the name, won't be giving spoilers.
The name.
Then it would be, I'm forgetting the title with when she's taking the train journey. Darkness. Yes, it is Darkness. Mostly because nafsiyati तौर पर आप किस तरह सियासत को देखते हैं. And that way, the stories all speak to each other individually also. In a way that you have this woman who's talking about her anxiety, and you read Razia into it. Then you have Razia who's exhausted because university professor, young children. You have Razia who has people taking care of her, either coming with money orders or repairing an old clock. And then you have Nietzsche, where there is this Dalit character who says, well, I don't need a man, unlike you, in brackets. And it doesn't come across in a very in-your-face, cheeky tone. But if you've read the whole book together, then you know that, look at you, a train ride unsettled you so much. Here is a woman who's actually transgressed doubly so. And you, on the other hand, has to undo your bias regarding what she can or cannot do. So that way, these stories all really speak with each other. बाकी आप किताब पढ़िए, अब और स्पॉइलर मैं नहीं दूंगी.
Shoni, just one thing, since nobody is asking me, so I'll tell my favorite, it is Shawl, because I can't resist. I have
a
read,
beautiful story.
yeah, I have put so much effort in reading and preparing, so I will also talk about my favorite. You can't just ignore it. So that's Shawl, because of my interest in material memory. It talks about this idea of shawl, which is passed from generation to another. Again, there is a lot of history involved regarding with Lucknow, Wajid Ali Shah. So that is something which I really love. Ashwani, maybe your favorite story, just name, no spoilers, and then we will take a couple of questions from our lovely audience, and then before we
I'm
call
not a
it
very
day.
maternal person, so I don't have to choose. See, I'll say, well, Shawl is a very beautiful story because it's also about kind of non-living things having a life. And a friendship almost with a shawl. So it's a very beautiful story. Well, I will say that I liked, well, Andhera for me remains the most powerful, but and it's true for everything in my life in general, is that I don't have fixed favorites. I loved the entire range, and I think I'll have a certain week where I'll be thinking more of Andhera, another week when I'll be thinking of Shawl, another week that lovely story about the courtesan who has the beautiful message around peace. So I think at different points in time, depending on what I'm confronted with, I will pick a favorite.
Questions from lovely audience who has been, very patient audience. So we have Professor Nishat.
Dr. Shohini Ghosh, she talked about the rich interiority in Razia Sajjad Zahir's writing, and Sumaira mentioned reflexivity. Now, my question to you, my limited question to you, that in the English translation of Razia Sajjad Zahir's Urdu writings, how are the silences, the rich interiority, the reflexivity, ellipses, gaps, hesitations, dialogical, dialectical, and tensions, and affective assonances or dissonances, affective, answered affect, how are they mediated through specific translation strategies? And to what extent do these translational practices align with or disrupt Deleuze and Guattari's formulation of minor literature? Because, mind you, it's from Urdu into English. So particularly in relation to feminist minoritarian expression. और एक और बहुत ही, जब आप बात करी थी तो दिमाग में उछल कूद एक दूसरे सवाल की हो गई, जब आपने कहा कि जब आप ट्रांसफ़र करती हैं, तर्जुमा करती हैं किसी टेक्स्ट को, तो आप के जहन में ये होता है, हाउ वुड इट वुड इट विजुअली द अलाइनमेंट होगा कि नहीं होगा, तो उसमें आप कैफियत को कितना गुणा भाग जगह देती हैं, क्योंकि ये जो लिटरेचर जो एक मीडियम है, सिर्फ इमेजिस्टिक मीडियम नहीं है, इसमें एफेक्ट, ये इसमें कैफियत भी बहुत बहुत इम्पॉर्टेंट पार्ट प्ले करती है. तो बस.
Thank you for those fantastic questions. See, the first thing when you're talking about silences, that is quite a prominent thing in the writings of Razia Sajjad Zahir. And especially when you were talking about how are her stories, especially the partition stories, different from the other partition writers or the other women writers. It is because her stories have a lot of silences. There is, things are being said in between the lines, like the story that we were actually talking about, Andhera. जो fear हम लोगों में इतना हुआ है उस कहानी को पढ़ के, it's not because of the language, it's because of the gaps which is there, कि उसने खिड़की बंद कर दी, फिर उसे घुटन हुई, उसने खिड़की खोल दी. Nowhere is she saying कि उसको बेहद डर लग रहा है, but वो बार बार फिर वो मुंह धोने गई, फिर वो bathroom, and then she thinks कि क्या मैं bathroom में ही रुकी रहूं, because she's in a train compartment. So these are actually all the silences and all the misses which are there. And it has been a challenge. I will not deny that it has not been difficult. All translations are difficult, and again, when you were talking about the process of translation and how do I talk about that visual image also, that visual image is a kind of a tool that I do for myself, in the sense that, and going back to like being the process of translation, I kind of think that there are 3 roles that a translator does. The translator has to first become a reader. You read the entire thing, let it sink in. You have to understand the tone and those things which are being unsaid, things which are in between the lines. Once you get that tone, then the second role is that role of a writer. And then you start writing it in a different language, in the target language. And the third and the final role is of an editor. Then you actually go back to it, and that is the time when I look at that visual image. When I read it for the first time, I could imagine that story. अंधेरा जो है कि उन्होंने कैसे खिड़की बंद की होगी, खोली होगी, पूरे कंपार्टमेंट में अकेली थी, किस किस्म की कैफियत रही होगी. Am I good enough to be able to bring at least the nuances of those feelings, उस किस्म की जो कैफियत है, वो क्या तर्जुमे में आ पा रही है कि नहीं आ पा रही है? I mean, I can't say I'm a translator and at the end of the day with the n number of edits, I was satisfied with it. But it's for the reader to actually understand. But again, what happens is when a reader is picking up a translated text, they will not picking up the thing in the source language. Then the thing is, if it's reading well, agar wo bagair झटके लगे. See, as a translator, what I can say is I've really tried to retain as much as possible. Because in her stories, those silences are very important. Yes. Because none of her stories are over the top. And she manages to communicate exactly what she plans to, what she has set out to do. And she definitely takes help of in between the lines, जिसको हम कहते हैं. बहुत सारी चीज़ें जो वो अल्फाज से नहीं कह रही हैं, but we gather what she is trying to say. As a translator, all I can say is, I've done it to the best of my ability. The rest is for you guys to pick up the book and read and
In
judge.
fact, if I can add, Nishat's question is very important that we think about silence. And having read the stories only in translation, I can say that it has been communicated to us. So anyone else who wants to say something or want to add something or want to know about Razia, will be more happy to talk more about. Okay, there is one gentleman there.
Thank you for the panel for such a wonderful discussion. My question is that Razia Sajjad Zahir imagine Muslim society and institutions like AMU as spaces of radical and social reform, especially for Muslim women's intellectual and political agency. So how do we understand the shift from that progressive vision to today's AMU, where Muslim women's voices are often marginalized or constrained?
She never went to AMU. She never went to Aligarh. She studied first in Ajmer, where her father was a principal. And then she got married at the age of 20, and then she did a master's from Allahabad University. So I don't know if we can bring in the AMU context here.
Yeah, so if you are interested in, there are, Rashid Jahan was there, her voices were not at all suppressed. Zaida Zaidi, very prominent. So there are so many. In fact, even in Hindi you have. But Razia is not someone who should be associated with this. Anyone else who has some other question or something else to, hearing none, so man to nahi kar raha hai, but as Shahriyar Sahab says, har ek मुलाकात का अंजाम जुदाई क्यों होता है? तो I'm also wondering हर इस मुलाकात का अंजाम जुदाई क्यों होता है? So with this note, I would like to call Urvashi, and perhaps with this we'll call it a day.
Thanks so much, Sabah, Shohini, Sumaira. Notice all 3 names are with S. It was not designed. And Harris, for this really wonderful discussion, so thoughtful, so rich, so multi-layered, And it's rare to find, you know, when you're discussing the work of one writer and there's their work which the audience may not have read, to hold everybody's interest, but you can see that everyone has been wrapped and people haven't walked out. So many, many thanks. The only thing is I was really worried when you started telling the story that you were going to tell the end of each one, you know, and I thought, oh no, nobody's going to go and buy the book now. पर शुक्र है आपने वो सारा नहीं किया, एक दो कहानियाँ उनकी बता दिया.
आई एम वेरी श्योर उसके बाद भी ये खरीदेंगे.
तो प्लीज़ थैंक यू फॉर बीइंग सच अ वंडरफुल ऑडियंस. और आप लोग किताबें प्लीज़ खरीदिए, बाहर पड़ी हुई हैं. And please read it, and any other books that you want from this series and from Zuban, you're very welcome to. We'd love to welcome you to our website and to our office. Thank you all very much.